So we are moving right now to our next session, which will be moderated by my partner, Liza Pershina. And we are welcoming Anastasia Gordeeva from Charltons Law, so Belt and Road Director of Charltons Law, our general partner of the event. And we are welcoming Domenik Stuber from Zetland. Liza, your word, please.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Eastern Business Express. Glad to see you all here. Thank you for introduction, Ivan. So I'm partner at Ubicon, which is the organizer of today's event. And I'm honored to be a host of this panel. So the focus of our panel today is on services needed for the companies expanding their businesses in Hong Kong. Everyone knows that Hong Kong is a financial center, providing with a sound legal system, low and simple tax regime, and free flow of capital, providing with full range of financial products, and large pool of talents and other benefits for entrepreneurs and startups. And today we're going to have experts who are going to with whom we are going to discuss all these issues. Here is Anastasia Gordeeva, Belt and Road Director at Charltons Law, and Domenik Stuber, Director at Zetland Group, and Zetland Group General Manager. Welcome to our panel. So first, we will devote some time to the introductions, and then we will move to the questions. And I ask our attendees to actively participate in our Q&A, because in the end of the session, we're going to pick up some questions and answer. So yeah, Anastasia, welcome on stage.
Many thanks, Liza. Hello, everyone. I'm Anastasia Gordeeva from Charltons. Today, I'm delighted to be with you to talk about the opportunities for Eastern Europeans in Hong Kong, and in particular about the options for setting up business in Hong Kong. So let me give you some background information about me and my firm. I'm the Belt and Road Director at Charltons, and my main area of activity is providing assistance to Eastern Europe and CIS companies wishing to conduct business in Hong Kong. By the way, currently I'm in Georgia, so let me know if anyone is around. I will be happy to meet. Our firm, Charltons, is a Hong Kong law firm which focuses on all aspects of corporate finance. Our practice covers initial public offerings, mergers and acquisitions, private equity investments, investment funds, securities law, and cryptocurrencies. We also work with companies in the mining and mineral sector on a variety of deals. We are based in Hong Kong, and we also have offices in Shanghai, Beijing, and Yangon, Myanmar. We have considerable experience of advising companies seeking a listing on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, which is consistently ranked at the world's top exchanges in terms of IPO funds raised. Charltons also has extensive experience of advising Eastern European and CIS companies and financial institutions on Hong Kong law and regulation. We advise startups, early stage and growing companies on all aspects of their operations, including advising on the range of operational and commercial agreements, ranging from supply, manufacturing, outsourcing, R&D, distribution, agency, franchising, logistics, licensing, and employment agreements. And many of the inquiries that we have received recently from Eastern European clients have related to cryptocurrencies, and we have provided advice on the regulatory requirements for offering crypto for sale in Hong Kong and the setting up of crypto funds and crypto exchanges. Back to you, Liza.
Thank you, Anastasia. Domenik, you're welcome to introduce yourself, your company.
Thank you, Lisa, and good day to everyone, as you can see from around the world. I'm here to represent Zetland today. Zetland is a corporate service provider headquartered in Hong Kong, and we have offices also in Singapore and Shanghai. Our objective as a corporate service provider is to enable companies and businesses to operate their expansion into Asia, and in particular Hong Kong for that matter. And that applies specifically to startups as well. So we assist with the establishment of companies, corporate governance around maintaining those companies, and outsourcing of administrative functions such as accounting, tax, and HR, in order for companies to focus on their core activities and founders to focus on their core activities, and enabling companies to expand on a very small footprint with the least overhead cost and expenses in Asia and a business expansion. For myself, I've been in the industry for the past 12 years, working in Hong Kong and Singapore, advising clients on market entry, strategies, compliance, and tax in those jurisdictions, Hong Kong, Singapore, and expansion to mainland China. That's very, very brief for me. You can follow up later, but I want to reserve the time for the more important parts.
Thank you, Domenik. Thank you. So yeah, let's move to the Q&A session. So the first question I will ask to Anastasia. What issues, what things, problems overseas startups should know about when they decide to set up business in Hong Kong? What are the cases in your practice, and what tips would you give to the companies expanding in Asia via Hong Kong?
Thanks, Liza. Well, Hong Kong has long been a heaven for entrepreneurs, and it's often ranked as one of the easiest jurisdictions in which to set up and operate business. So there are a number of ways of setting up business in Hong Kong. And the most common way is to incorporate a company limited by shares, which will allow the company to enjoy Hong Kong's low corporate tax rate, which we're all aware of. A company limited by shares can be either a public company or it can be a private company. And a private company limited by shares is generally used for a business that wants to limit its liability, and the shareholders will only be liable for debts of the company up to the amount unpaid on their shares, of course, if any. The articles of association of a private company must restrict the number of its shareholders to 50, and it will exclude the employees and prohibit invitations to the public to acquire its shares or debentures. A private company will not, therefore, be appropriate if the business plans to raise capital from a large number of investors. Private companies are often used by startups in Hong Kong and SMEs. The requirements for directors and shareholders are straightforward. So a private company must have at least one director who is an actual person, not a corporate director. Directors must be at least 18 years old, and they can be of any nationality, which is great, right? Directors are not required to be resident in Hong Kong, which is another advantage. A private company must have at least one shareholder. Shareholders can be corporations or individuals. Individual shareholders must be at least, again, 18 years old, but can be of any nationality and residency. Private companies must also appoint a company secretary to keep their books and records and make necessary fillings with the register of companies, which is actually not that many in Hong Kong, which is also good. The company secretary can be an individual or a corporation. If the company secretary is individual, which is important. They must be the residents in Hong Kong and must not be the same person as the company's sole director. A corporate company secretary must have its registered office or registered place of business in Hong Kong, which is also applicable almost in any jurisdiction, as we know. The private company must also have a registered office in Hong Kong to which all official communications, notices, and love letters can be sent. A company can be incorporated extremely quickly in Hong Kong. So the first step in establishing the company will involve choosing the company name, and also need to check with the company registry to ensure that the intended company name is acceptable, so that there is no already registered company on that name. And there are so many names already in the company registry, so sometimes it is a challenge actually. The application is made to the Hong Kong Companies Registry by submitting 3 documents, which is not that difficult to do. It's company's articles of association, the form of incorporation, and a notice to business registration office. And altogether, you will need to submit with the required fee. Application can either be made using a hard copy documents, or it can be made online, which is very convenient. And if an application is made electronically, the company certificate of incorporation and business registration certificate will normally be issued and available for downloading within 1 hour after submitting the application. So where the application is made using a hard copy documents, the certificate of incorporation and business registration certificates will be issued within 4 working days and available for collection, which is also quite fast. It is also possible to carry on business in Hong Kong as a sole proprietor or a partnership, but the main disadvantage of this is that the business is not regarded as distinct from its owners, which means that the sole proprietor or partners will be liable for the debts incurred by the business. Probably the most difficult part of commencing business in Hong Kong, as elsewhere in the world these days, relates to the opening of a bank account due to the extensive know your client inquiries banks are required to conduct. The other issues that may need to be considered include protecting the business intellectual property and trademarks, since intellectual property is often the most valuable asset for any startup. So we have set up many Hong Kong companies for clients from Eastern Europe, the CIS countries and Baltic countries. We have worked on many matters for some large Russian listed companies and large private groups. In the startup area, over the past 2 or 3 years, we have, for example, advised a group of Belarusian region engaged in multi-device cross-platform mobile app developments on restructuring their Hong Kong company. We also advised Czech-originated car wash business on raising capital in Hong Kong for the expansion in China. We advised the Bulgarian securities brokerage on operations in Hong Kong and China. And we have also advised Eastern European and CIS clients extensively on ICO, as I've mentioned, which was before largely popular. The setup of crypto exchanges, crypto and virtual asset funds, Hong Kong virtual asset regulation, and crowdfunding. So back to you, Liza.
Yeah, thank you, Anastasia. But what tips, what general advice would you give to the companies considering Hong Kong as a gate to Asia? Because you mentioned all the most of the companies are looking for expansion in China, which is a great market for newcomers.
Well, for any company to do business in Hong Kong, I think the most important to get their documents in a proper order to be able to conduct a KYC procedure, which is the first step for any company which is entering in Hong Kong. So you will need to spend maybe a month or 2 in order to prepare all the documents to be done in a proper way. So you need to pay attention to it and keep it in mind that this will require an effort in terms of time and also in terms of money spent.
Okay. Thank you. This is a good point of view of the lawyer. Yeah, and talking about Hong Kong tax regime, I would like to ask the question to Domenik. Could you give us the overview of tax regime in Hong Kong?
Yes, certainly. I mean, the tax regime in Hong Kong would be a topic, and the intricacies of that would fill the whole day already. But very briefly, because the Hong Kong tax regime is quite different from other tax regimes around the world, which typically operate on a residence basis and charging worldwide income to tax in that jurisdiction. Hong Kong, on the other hand, has a pure territorial tax regime. That means that only profits that arise in or derive from Hong Kong are subject to the tax charge in Hong Kong. And that those profits only apply to income from a business, trade, or profession that is being exercised in Hong Kong. So as you can see, it's quite different from the usual one that many would be used to. And I understand that this is somewhat of a mouthful of sentence, that Hong Kong businesses are only taxed based on their profits that arise from a business, professional, trade in Hong Kong. But essentially what it means that it boils down to basically two words, that it must be a business and it must be arising in Hong Kong or from Hong Kong. So if either of those conditions is not met, then the tax charge would typically not apply or could not apply. And also there's no tax then on passive income sources, which would typically be dividends and interest, neither on capital gains, and in that sense, then profits that are being considered as generated from offshore. Anything else that is considered as taxable income in Hong Kong is subject to a two-tier tax regime, whereas the first Hong Kong dollar 2 million, which is approximately 260,000 US dollars, is charged at a rate of 8.25%, and anything above that at a rate of 16%, which compared to international rates is fairly low. And there are no other direct or indirect taxes for businesses. There are no state taxes. There's no sales tax in Hong Kong. So those are the actual rates that apply to businesses operating in Hong Kong. I mentioned now the offshore part, the offshore tax part. This has to be a claim. So it is not an automatic approach nor a check the box approach. It has to be applied for individually. It will be individually assessed. And there has been over the past decades many of case laws and precedents, as well as departmental interpretation and practice notes issued by the IRD and through the courts in Hong Kong on how that is being interpreted, or how it's supposed to be interpreted in its day-to-day application. The guiding principle in that sense is one has to look at what a taxpayer has done and where he has done it in order then to establish the location of the source of profits, whether that be in Hong Kong or overseas. So in detail, it can get very complicated in that sense. Maybe I'll add to that some examples or some guiding lines that for service income companies. As an example, service income companies, one of the leading cases in the past has been the Li and Fung case, which was about 10 years ago. And as a general rule, if you're a service company and you're not conducting any business in Hong Kong, you have your service providers that perform services outside of Hong Kong, and there's no physical office or staff in Hong Kong, or only administrative services, or those are being outsourced. The contracts are negotiated outside of Hong Kong. There's no significant travel, and business and contracts are not being concluded in Hong Kong. Then this has a higher chance of being accepted as an offshore case. Notably here is that for service income, this can be proportioned to offshore as well as onshore. So it doesn't have to be a one or all or one or nothing approach. Whereas for trading receipts, this is either or. There's no apportionment to offshore or onshore. And for trading, it's a bit more complicated cases. And the past cases also have shown that the IRD is taking a more narrow approach to the cases they assess. And what they see is business conducted in Hong Kong, which now seems to include also the financing of the business and its profits. So there's a general trend, as is with all tax jurisdiction, of a narrowing approach in general, but it's still certainly possible, and there are cases on a day-to-day basis or every year that can be done. And there are generally two ways of getting tax certainty around that. The first approach is to seek an advance ruling. That can be done even before commencing a business in Hong Kong by presenting a case to the IRD for their assessment and their ruling. If there's a favorable ruling, and there's no change in the operating model of the business, then the ruling can be relied on until there's any change of it. The other option, which is a more common option, is to seek or to make a claim with the first tax return of a company, which is typically after 18 months of the incorporation of a company, and then specifying the case, making the claim, and subsequently responding to questions from the IRD and substantiating the claim with documentary evidence. So those are the two typical approaches. But again, with the low and simple tax regime in Hong Kong of 8.25 and 16%, and a huge amount of allowable deductions, so there's not many exclusions for tax computation in Hong Kong. This is simply based on profits as per accounts, net profits as per accounts, plus minus some additions and deductions from a tax point of view, which is primarily the depreciation of assets of the company. Those are treated differently from accounting rules to tax rules. So even then, if an offshore claim is not successful, very often the net tax rate is fairly low on businesses.
Yeah, thank you very much, Domenik. I can tell that this is one of the topics you can talk a lot about. So would you suggest to the new companies to apply with professional service provider, or it is possible to do by themselves?
It is possible to do them by themselves, but very often you have a tax representative appointed, which is a professional company in Hong Kong. The services that we provide, for example, for the simple reason that you can make the tax claim by yourself, but before that, the basis for making a tax return is the audited accounts of the company. So you already need to have a professional engaged prior to being able to file your tax returns. And then very often this goes as a tax representative as well, which makes then the necessary tax computation. And if the business nature is fairly complicated, or if the business transactions are a bit more complicated, then again, this makes a lot more sense to have a professional review that and see, what are the tax benefits and how can the most advantageous tax position be reached, and then making the claim and seeing where or which profits may be eligible for tax claim. And very often it would be recommended even to start looking at that from the very beginning at the onset of the commencement of the business in order to plan ahead. So if an offshore claim is the purpose, then it's usually recommended to get a professional help at the very onset to help with the structuring, because of the very intricacies of the operation model. There can be different options that then from a tax perspective give a completely different ruling and classification than what was initially thought of. For example, usually typical reinvoicing company or reinvoicing business where a supplier is based in China and goods are manufactured, they are invoiced and sold through a Hong Kong company internationally, through an associated entity and sales network. This can be restructured on documentary basis as an agency, rather than pure invoicing and trading company, therefore giving more flexibility in that sense to the business of claiming an offshore tax case, as well as then the contract details. As I mentioned before, financing may be an issue, as well as ownership of the goods, and when those pass on, such as the legal risk, as well as inventory risk, credit risk, those need to be considered at an early stage, even in the ideally in the contract negotiation stage, in order then to prepare for a more successful offshore claim. So again, professional help is highly recommended in order to prepare, as well as then actually file an offshore claim and answer the tax queries from the IRD after that.
Yeah, cannot agree more. Thank you very much. Anastasia, the question to you, Hong Kong, with regards to Greater Bay Area, what benefits the entrepreneurs of Hong Kong can have? And please introduce us this specifics.
Thanks, Liza. So Hong Kong's positioning as part of the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area, which is China's wealthiest urban cluster and testbed for innovative solutions, actually presents numerous opportunities for startups in Hong Kong. The Greater Bay Area, GBA development, provides a sizable market of over 70 million consumers, a base for rapid prototyping and high-end manufacturing. It also offers access to an expanding pool of shared talents and research and development facilities, including, in particular, the Hong Kong Shenzhen Innovation and Technology Park, which was established in 2017. This technology park is located in Hong Kong and acts as a base for cooperation in innovation and technology research. So it's open to companies from around the world, which can obtain access to the mainland China market. The development of the GBA is part of China's strategy of developing clusters of major cities to create major areas of economic strength. The GBA companies, GBA combines the 9 mainland Chinese cities, including Guangzhou, which has a population of 14.5 million people, Shenzhen with around 12.5 million people, and Dongguan with about 8.3 million people. So China aims to drive innovation and reform by synergizing the best qualities of Guangzhou, Hong Kong, Macau, which is to promote the economic development of the region for the benefit of all. So this China's Silicon Valley, where Shenzhen is a major high-tech hub and is home to tech giants such as Huawei and Tencent. So in April this year, Hong Kong, Guangzhou, and Macau launched the Greater Bay Area International Information Technology Association, which aims to boost the development and application of information technology by leveraging advantages of the entire region. It plans to conduct policy research work and to establish communication platforms for enterprises to improve regional connectivity in the IT sector and develop IT talent in the region. Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam has also stressed the importance of the technical cooperation between Hong Kong and Shenzhen in the development of the GBA into a global innovation hub. The GBA transformation into an international Bay Area, attracting global businesses and investors, is opening up definitely tremendous opportunities for everyone. As regards China's Belt and Road Initiative, at the interface between China and the rest of the world, Hong Kong stands to benefit from business opportunities arising from the Belt and Road Initiative. This initiative covers more than 60 countries across Asia, Africa, and Europe. And this is an extremely ambitious project for China, both economically and diplomatically. Under the Belt and Road Initiative, Chinese banks and companies seek to fund and build roads, power plants, ports, railways, 5G networks, and through these countries which are covered by this initiative. And as you know, that Eastern European countries, CIS countries, Baltic countries also plays important role under the Belt and Road Initiative. As China's most cosmopolitan city and leading international financial center, Hong Kong's key areas of contribution relate firstly to the provision of course, finance. The Hong Kong is the world's largest offshore renminbi center and is able to provide infrastructure finance to projects along the Belt and Road. Secondly, Hong Kong has excellent professional service providers in accounting, consultancy, law, arbitration, and many other sectors. The Hong Kong professionals are well equipped to advise on infrastructure projects, commercial disputes, and dealing with property rights and investment protection, which is all gives, of course, a lot of value to the Hong Kong playing an important role in GBA.
Thank you, Anastasia. As you mentioned, talents and talent sourcing, I will ask Domenik to answer this question. What is the immigration policy in Hong Kong at the moment? How the talent sourcing is looking like?
Great. Well, Hong Kong still has a very open immigration policy in general. There's the main policy for foreigners, which are not mainland Chinese nationals or residents, is the general employment policy. Under the general employment policy, there are generally two streams for foreigners to apply for residence visa in Hong Kong, which is the employment visa and the business investor visa. The employment visa is for talents that have the necessary background and experience and have secured a job offer in Hong Kong. Now, the job offer must meet market conditions, cannot be competitive or undercut the local workforce. So there's going to be a test of that, as well as the suitability of the sponsoring company. It must be a suitable business that can sponsor an employment visa. This is generally still fairly straightforward. And the other one is the business investor visa, which then focuses more on the business investor and the significant benefit that that business brings to Hong Kong. So the test is under the same policy, fairly similar, although there are distinctive differences. The business investor visa focuses more on the investment amount and what kind of investment comes into Hong Kong and how that business benefits Hong Kong and the Hong Kong society, as well as the Hong Kong economy. And the employment visa focuses more on what benefits that talent can bring to Hong Kong. Now, it depends which visa to apply for, especially for founders, because they are eliminating criteria. Typically, under the employment stream, there's a restriction on ownership of a company or starting a company. If someone starts a company, then this would typically be considered as a business investor and not as an employment, even though that person may be a director or managing director of that business as well. And the same thing is if there's a business investor case, then it would typically not be an employment visa case. So this is how those two streams are being distinguished. And in general, it's still the open policy, right? Tech talents are still being sought after in Hong Kong. There's a specific stream for tech talents, which all of this does not really apply to business investors and founders of companies, but this is to attract tech talent and enable tech businesses in Hong Kong to source and secure talents from overseas, but also then more for junior to mid-level positions rather than senior executives or founders. But those industries are still very much supported. There's still the general open policy of the Hong Kong immigration and to attract new talents and sought after talents to Hong Kong. And it still applies as well that after 7 years of residence in Hong Kong, a person is eligible to file for permanent residency and retain and get permanent residence in Hong Kong. So it's still a very attractive immigration jurisdiction as well, to start business and be present in the region.
Thank you, Domenik. I think we have only one question left to wrap this part up. So question to both of you. I'll start with Anastasia. Could you please name me a few reasons why entrepreneurs should think about Hong Kong when they move their business to Asia?
Thanks, Liza. Well, I think we don't have enough time for me to name all reasons, because I think there are many reasons for that. So, Hong Kong offers a very favorable business environment for startup businesses, and despite the economic challenges brought by COVID-19, Hong Kong startups have proved remarkably resilient. In 2020, there were over 3,300 startups in Hong Kong, employing over 10,600 people. So this represents an increase of more than 50% in terms of the number of startups and of around 70% in terms of startup employees since 2017. So around a quarter of Hong Kong startups were founded by individuals from guests outside Hong Kong. So as one of the world's major international financial centers and Asia's premier financial center, Hong Kong attracts talents from around of the globe, and we can understand why. So with no restrictions on the movement of capital, which is super essential. So movement of capital in and out of Hong Kong. And of course, proximity to mainland China, right? Which is Hong Kong's appeal as a venue for startups spans a broad variety of industries. And in 2020, the industries with the greatest number of startups in Hong Kong were, of course, fintech, e-commerce, supply chain management and logistics technology, professional and consultancy services, and IT. So there are also a number of startups in the education and health sector. So for example, the Cyberport Incubation Program supports entrepreneurs and startups by providing a range of business and professional services. And up to 500,000 Hong Kong dollars, unfortunately not US dollars, but still good enough, in financial support over 24 months. Cyberport also provides a comprehensive platform for supporting digital tech entrepreneurs. And another major government initiative is the Hong Kong Science and Technology Park, which has invested around 100 million, again, Hong Kong dollars, in technology and enterprises over the last 3 years, and has attracted over 1,350 million Hong Kong dollars in private investment. So venture capitalists are a major source of funds for Hong Kong startups, and their investment in Hong Kong grew from 1.24 billion in 2014 up to 9.9 billion in 2019. So you feel the numbers are growing exponentially. So I do believe all these good reasons for the startups to consider Hong Kong as a jurisdictions for them to move and expand their business.
Thank you, Anastasia. What Domenik thinks about that?
Yeah, maybe just as a quick addition to that, Hong Kong has also been shown to be a very attractive jurisdiction for startups, given the number of accelerators that are here and the businesses that they support, as well as then after that, angel investors. There's a growing list of angel investors in Hong Kong that keeps on going on, as well as then venture capitalists and private equity that comes into Hong Kong, and especially the more and more influx of capital, private equity as well as venture capital, and also going then downwards to the accelerator and angel investor stage coming from mainland China. So there's plenty of opportunities for startups and reasons to come to Hong Kong simply for that. If that is not enough, then obviously it's Hong Kong status as an international financial center and the access to international capital once it comes to a later stage of raising capital for startups, as well as perception of the jurisdiction. And if any businesses or any startup is working towards China or with China, obviously Hong Kong as the gateway to mainland China is a very important factor for any business, right? And in that sense, Hong Kong provides access to mainland China. One is by the comprehensive economic, the close economic partnership agreement with mainland China, which is available even to fairly young Hong Kong-based companies. I think the threshold is 2 years. And I'm sure Invest Hong Kong and other agencies can explain more on that. But this is a fairly easy access as well, through which Hong Kong startups and businesses can take advantage of the gateway status, as well as then simplified procedures and common understanding between mainland China and Hong Kong. So as a gateway to mainland China, this is the place to be.
Thank you, Domenik. And a follow-up question to you regarding the ease of access of startups. One of the most painful questions to the startups, not only startups, but all the companies, how to open a bank account. And I think our attendees will be very interested in that. Is it possible to open it remotely, or what procedures have to be done?
Yes, I believe Anastasia touched on that before as well, with the preparation of the business and for the KYC requirements by banks. It is a somewhat lengthy process. However, banks in Hong Kong are opening up their channels to remote onboarding, and the first banks have already established that. Obviously, it's still a somewhat selective process due to the complexities of remote onboarding from a KYC and regulatory perspective. So but this is an ongoing process, and this will only become more simplified and more accessible going forward. Although it does take time to have that established. So for certain cases, it's already possible to open a bank account in Hong Kong remotely, but unfortunately not for every case. But I'm confident that this will come as well in the near-term future.
Yeah, with the development of fintech solutions, definitely, and new initiatives of Hong Kong, for sure. Let's hope for that. Hopefully, a pandemic situation will drive Hong Kong towards technical hub rather than only financial. And thank you very much for the answers. Anastasia, maybe the last question to you. It's the questions. These are the questions from the list of frequently asked questions. So, when would it be more appropriate to incorporate a public company rather than a private one?
Well, it depends on if a business wanted to raise capital from the public, it would have to be incorporated as a public company limited by shares, as private companies are not allowed to invite members of the public to subscribe for their shares or debt instruments. And so a private company is only suitable for a business that will raise funds privately.
So it means when the company is thinking about fundraising, and when this is the purpose of incorporation, then public companies, the structure.
Correct.
Okay. I think we have any questions from audience. Why our audience is so shy today? I think maybe later, maybe maybe later. And the time
I think we can make like follow-up emails to all attendees with the contacts of our speakers, that they can reach out directly and ask any questions they're interested in.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Anastasia. Thank you, Domenik. It was a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you, Domenik. Thank you. Bye-bye.